It was Wednesday afternoon, May 2018. I just finished a cup of tea and I was washing my cup when my dad's friend's nephew walked into the kitchen. They were staying with us at the time. Next thing I know, he was grabbing me from behind and he was trying to drag me out of the kitchen to his bedroom. We were fighting and he dragged me all the way to the passage. I held on to doors, but he was just too strong. And this was not the first time it had happened. But I would just fight him off easily like I used to do maybe at the time. But this time it was different. Hands were everywhere. He was just his fingers, he was just big. He was.
And I thought that I had done something to provoke him. People think that something must have happened for it to happen. But all that happened was I made a cup of tea in my own home.
If you found this hard to listen to, imagine how hard it was to say. That's why at Rape Crisis, we have a 24-hour crisis line with free counseling. So if you can't speak to anyone, speak to us at 021 447 9762. And if you want to help, donate now. Visit rapecrisis.org.za.
Waking up all day with Vuga Online Radio.
If you've spent any time on Earth, you might have noticed that humans are not the most rational of creatures. We make decisions based mostly on emotions instead of facts, and a lot of times we're guided by tribal instinct. Part of the problem is that the human brain evolved to help us survive, and not necessarily to help us be factually accurate. So we often respond better to social and tribal dynamics than to intellectual analysis. For example, if someone's tribe believes that Obama is a secret Muslim born in Kenya, that person probably thinks the hard proof of his US birth certificate is fake. That conclusion is neither rational nor accurate. But from a tribal perspective, it makes sense. It's safer to agree with your tribe and stay united ideologically, even if you're wrong about the facts, than to disagree and isolate yourself. Another part of the problem is that our brain is constantly protecting our worldview and sense of identity. So when our worldview is challenged, that same part of the brain that processes physical danger gets activated. This is why people sometimes react so aggressively to information that proves them wrong. And this is why it's often so hard to have an intelligent political debate. Several studies have also shown that there is a backfire effect that happens when people encounter facts that contradict their current beliefs. They actually become more convinced of their original ideas. So fighting ignorance with facts is like fighting a grease fire with water. It seems like it should work, but it actually just makes the whole thing worse. Lastly, there's the problem of lack of empathy. Several studies have found that when humans are divided into groups of any kind, we instinctively become less empathetic to members of other groups. That means that for survival's sake, we might instinctively empathize less with other races, other nationalities, and even other sports teams. This instinctive dehumanization of other groups is what makes things like slavery and genocide possible in our society. So, what can you do? If you want someone to consider factual information that clashes with their beliefs, first, you have to prevent their brain from seeing you as a personal threat. So, look for ways to identify the person as part of your tribe and you as part of theirs. Hey, we're part of the same family. Hey, we're both parents. Hey, we both still play Pokemon Go. Whatever. Anything that communicates that you're part of the same tribe. That's the first step. Second, consider the possibility that you may be wrong. Maybe the facts are not on your side, in which case admitting it will help you model to the other person that it's okay to be wrong. I understand that none of this is easy or smooth, but if we want to continue to function as a stable society, we have to learn to get past our own natural biases. Only when that happens, we will be able to move forward towards a better future. Peace.
Welcome back to Leadership Mondays, and I hope you're having a great Monday, and you're enjoying the weather outside. Remember, the essence of peace is accepting things as they are. And just before we came in, I just played you a clip there around how people don't trust information, or people cannot be changed by information. And that's already an indication around what you need to be paying attention to in terms of helping people trust you more intelligently. You heard that a lot of it is about emotion, but a lot of it is about motivation, which we spoke about in the previous section. Now, what I want to do quickly is then to give you a formula around trust as it is proposed by the Eye Opener Institute that I have worked with in the UK. It says that think about a leader that you don't trust at all. Think about a person that you don't trust at all, right? So have a piece of paper, have a pen, and then write their name down. You don't have to tell us what their name is, but now, got it? Cool. First, on a scale of 1 to 10, how consistent is this person? How can you rely on them? Is their word their bond? So that's the first thing that you need to really pay attention to in this instance. How reliable is this person? How consistent are they? And that's the first thing. So 1 would be not consistent at all. You cannot even predict where they're going to be at all. And 10 would be where they are completely reliable. You can bet your money on it, right? Write a number now. Cool. Second thing, on a scale of 1 to 10, how open is this person? Openness in this instance talks about, do you know who they are and what with you? So 1 would be very low in terms of openness, and 10 would be absolutely open. Great. Let's move on to the third one. The third one is about clarity. In what way is this person on a scale of 1 to 10 clear? When you get out of that meeting, when you get out of that presentation, when you get out of that session with them, how do you feel about their clarity? Do you feel like they've told you absolutely anything, everything in very precise and clear terms and you understand exactly what they were saying? Or does it feel like they're using words to befuddle and then everything just seems like they said something but you're not sure what is it that they said? So if it's the latter, you probably will score it a little lower. If it's the former, you will probably score it a bit higher. Clarity and precision says, I know exactly what you meant, would essentially give it a higher score. And then, this then we spoke about, spent a whole 14 minutes just before we went to a break. How do you get a sense that they are interested in other people? How do you get interest in a sense that they're interested in you, first of all? How do you think they're interested in your needs? Are they clear and do they understand your needs? Do you feel like they're interested in solving your problem? This 10 would be extremely explicitly yes, and 1 would be absolutely not. And then finally, on a scale of 1 to 10, in what way does this person, does this leader seem to be making sure that everything is first about protecting number one? Number one, in this instance, protecting themselves and supporting themselves, winning themselves, enriching themselves. 1 and a score of 10 would be absolutely yes, it's all about them, and absolutely 1 would be essentially no, they are continuously trying to put other people first. So, what does your score look like? I'm hoping you have been writing those scores down, and we'll talk a little bit about the interpretation of it. So what does it all mean when you look at it? Now, already it's giving you the 5 elements of trust in line with the Eye Opener Institute, because if you look then at this, it says, are you reliable? Are you open? Are you clear? And are you showing concern for others as opposed to concern for yourselves? The higher you are, the higher the numbers for reliability, for openness, for clarity, and concern for others, they are already indicators, positive indicators for trust and trustworthiness, right? And then the lower the numbers, the lower the trust. And because this is a formula where the reliability, openness, clarity, and concern for others are sitting as a numerator. I think you know numerator. Now, if you haven't done, if you didn't do arithmetic at school, or at least, what do you guys call it now? That other maths that we do. That's not actual mathematics in schools. At least you should have done that. You will know what a numerator and a denominator is. Otherwise, just Google dictionary.com should be able to give you the difference between the denominator and the numerator. But the numerator and the denominator essentially give you a percentage. You are dividing the amount at the top and the amount at the bottom. So reliability, openness, clarity, and concern for others is at the top, so that gives you a figure. The amount at the bottom will give you the figure out of 10, and then you divide. Now, the resulting amount is essentially what do they call it? A fraction. It's a fraction, right? So a 0.77 for one of the leaders that we did, and I'll tell you which ones that we did for ourselves, and then 0.77 is an indicator that there's lower trust. For example, anything below 1 already tells you there's a lot of mistrust in terms of this person, and then anything above 4 tells you there's a lot of trust in terms of this, and then anything between 1 and 4 gives you an idea that there is some trust issues that need to be dealt with, but there's also some elements of this person that you trust. So I'm going to leave you for a moment to work this out.
How long does the average sex session last?
We start wrapping up.
That depends. Do you really want to know, or did you ask your buddies? The short answer is about 7 minutes. Yes, 7 minutes. It's average, which probably isn't long enough for your partner. That's why Durex developed Performer, for longer-lasting pleasure.
Are you looking for a quality used car at the right price? Then you're looking for Phoenix Used Cars. Visit our showroom at 148 Voortrekker Street in Benoni and survey our array of SUVs, sports cars,
because Durex Performer condoms make things last longer. Even radio ads. Unless you have somewhere you need to be.
Alliance Vehicle Finance.
Durex, own your situation.
Alliance Vehicle Finance is a registered financial services provider. Terms and conditions apply.
Vuga, it's time to work
Welcome
out.
back to Leadership Mondays, and we're starting to wrap up. What does it look like? What do your scores look like? We went and we did 3 leaders in the office. We did our president here, and who essentially got a score of 0.77. So that's kind of very worrying, and I've always said that he is not exactly trustworthy. He's doing the right things because from a competence perspective, he seems to know some of the things that he's doing, but from a perceptual perspective, he's not trustworthy. And I think part of the important things that have come out there for me, well, for us, because we kind of work together in this as members of the team, the reliability not very consistent, so very low score. Openness, not very open, so we don't really know who he is really. We know his name, but do we know what he is about? Do we know his values? It always seems like when he's on the stage that he's performing. And then slightly higher in terms of clarity, but even then it's still under 5 in terms of the score. And then there is also a sense that his concern for others is a bit mixed. It gives a mixed score. Somebody scored him a 4, while somebody else scored him a 1 in terms of that. And then we kind of opposed, and then of course there's a perception that he is also very strong on self-interest by one person, while somebody else gave him a moderate score also on self-interest. But in general, he scores anything between 0.77 and 2. That's still relatively low scores for trust anyway. But then we also then worked with Julius Malema, and we said, if you rate Julius Malema, what would it look like? And then he got 7 scores in terms of reliability, 7 in terms of openness, 8 in terms of clarity, and 5 in terms of concern for others. While it may seem that he is obviously putting other people first in the agenda of the people, there's also a bit of a sense that maybe it could be also all about Malema. But there seems to be no doubt about the fact that he's very consistent about where he stands, while there's also something there around the openness and the sharing that he shares. Of course, it's not exactly complete, so somebody actually gave him a bit of a thread there to say, I don't really know who he is, maybe he's also performing. And then of course the score of 4, which then talks about clarity in this instance and precision, but absolutely scored a 9 when it comes to 6 when it comes to caring for self-interest in this instance. So his self-interest score was not so high. So that's essentially what that looks like for Julius Malema there. What did yours look like? So I'm going to leave that to you. Now you have a formula of leadership trust that I think you should be able to use to be able. So it is important to then, this is now my last exercise to you. Then I'm going to leave you with the conversation or a presentation by Dr. Honora O'Neill. I'm going to ask you though a question here. If you turn the mirror around, if you take those scores and you score yourself, what does that look like for you? You don't have to share that information with anyone. But if we are going to be looking for trustworthiness, we also have to continuously take time to assess ourselves as leaders. How do we score? How consistent are we? How open are we? How clear are we in our conversations with others? And how do we show our concern for others? It might be we have it in our heads. And most importantly, do we continuously spend time going me? Or does it look like we also are putting our hands or putting our money where our mouth is when it comes to supporting others? Then that's all I'm going to give you today on Leadership Mondays. And I'm leaving you with the words of the Dame Baroness Honora O'Neill. And I will see you again, God willing, in the next week on Leadership Mondays as we talk about leadership. I think we're going to actually give you an interview, someone multi-award, well, not multi-award winning, but he has sold #1 bestseller author of a leadership coming up next week, if I have my way. And then we'll talk about his lessons about leadership and what does it mean, and we'll talk about the topic of hope. But for now, I wish you a great week. See you again next week. Ciao.
So I'm going to talk about trust, and I'm going to start by reminding you of the standard views that people have about trust. I think these are so commonplace, they've become cliches of our society, and I think there are three. One's a claim. There has been a great decline in trust, very widely believed. The second is an aim. We should have more trust. And the third is a task. We should rebuild trust. I think that the claim, the aim, and the task are all misconceived. So what I'm going to try to tell you today is a different story about a claim, an aim, and a task, which I think give one quite a lot better purchase on the matter. First, the claim. Why do people think trust has declined? I mean, if I really think about it on the basis of my own evidence, I don't know the answer. I'm inclined to think it may have declined in some activities or some institutions, and it might have grown in others. I don't have an overview. But, of course, I can look at the opinion polls. And the opinion polls are supposedly the source of a belief that trust has declined. When you actually look at opinion polls across time, there's not much evidence for that. That's to say, the people who were mistrusted 20 years ago, principally journalists and politicians, are still mistrusted. And the people who were highly trusted 20 years ago are still rather highly trusted. Judges, nurses, the rest of us are in between. And by the way, the average person in the street is almost exactly midway. But is that good evidence? What opinion polls record is, of course, opinions. What else can they record? So they're looking at the generic attitudes that people report when you ask them certain questions. Do you trust politicians? Do you trust teachers? Now, if somebody said to you, do you trust greengrocers? Do you trust fishmongers? Do you trust elementary school teachers? You would probably begin by saying, to do what? And that would be a perfectly sensible response. And you might say, when you understood the answer to that, well, I trust some of them, but not others. That's a perfectly rational thing. In short, in our real lives, we seek to place trust in a differentiated way. We don't make an assumption that the level of trust that we will have in every instance of a certain type of official or office holder or type of person is going to be uniform. I might, for example, say that I certainly trust a certain elementary school teacher I know to teach the reception class to read, but no way to drive the school minibus. I might, after all, know that she wasn't a good driver. I might trust my most loquacious friend to keep a conversation going, but not to manage to... he could keep a conversation going, but perhaps not to keep a secret. Simple. So if we've got those evidence in our ordinary lives of the way that trust is differentiated, why do we sort of drop all that intelligence when we think about trust more abstractly? I think the polls are very bad guides to a level of trust that actually exists, because they try to obliterate the good judgment that goes into placing trust. Secondly, what about the aim? The aim is to have more trust. Well, frankly, I think that's a stupid aim. It's not what I would aim at. I would aim to have more trust in the trustworthy, but not in the untrustworthy. In fact, I aim positively to try not to trust the untrustworthy. And I think of those people who, for example, placed their savings with the very aptly named Mr. Madoff, who then made off with them. And I think of them and I think, well, yes, too much trust. More trust is not an intelligent aim in this life. Intelligently placed and intelligently refused trust is the proper aim. Well, once one said that, one says, yeah, okay, that means that what matters in the first place is not trust, but trustworthiness. It's judging how trustworthy people are in particular respects. And I think that judgment requires us to look at three things. Are they competent? Are they honest? Are they reliable? And if we find that a person is competent in the relevant matters and reliable and honest, we'll have a pretty good reason to trust them because they'll be trustworthy. But if, on the other hand, they're unreliable, we might not. I have friends who are competent and honest, but I would not trust them to post a letter because they're forgetful. I have friends who are very confident they can do certain things, but I realize that they overestimate their own competence. And I'm very glad to say I don't think I have many friends who are competent and reliable, but extremely dishonest. If so, I haven't yet spotted it. But that's what we're looking for. Trustworthiness before trust. Trust is the response. Trustworthiness is what we have to judge. And of course, it's difficult. Across the last few decades, we tried to construct systems of accountability for all sorts of institutions and professionals and officials and so on that will make it easier for us to judge their trustworthiness. A lot of these systems have the converse effect. They don't work as they're supposed to. I remember I was talking with a midwife who said, well, you see, the problem is it takes longer to do the paperwork than to deliver the baby. And all over our public life, our institutional life, we find that problem, that the system of accountability that is meant to secure trustworthiness and evidence of trustworthiness is actually doing the opposite. It is distracting people who have to do difficult tasks, like midwives, from doing them by requiring them to tick the boxes, as we say. You can all give your own examples there. So much for the aim. The aim, I think, is more trustworthiness, and that is going to be different if we're trying to be trustworthy and communicate our trustworthiness to other people, and if we are trying to judge whether other people or office holders or politicians are trustworthy. It's not easy. It is judgment, and simple reaction attitudes don't do adequately here. Now, thirdly, the task. Calling the task rebuilding trust, I think also gets things backwards. It suggests that you and I should rebuild trust. Well, we can do that for ourselves. We can rebuild a bit of trustworthiness. We can do it two people together trying to improve trust. But trust in the end is distinctive because it's given by other people. You can't rebuild what other people give you. You have to give them the basis for giving you their trust. So you have to, I think, be trustworthy. And that, of course, is because you can't fool all of the people all of the time, usually. But you also have to provide usable evidence that you are trustworthy. How to do it? Well, every day, all over the place, it's being done by ordinary people, by officials, by institutions, quite effectively. Let me give you a simple commercial example. The shop where I buy my socks says I may take them back. And if they don't ask any questions, they take them back and give me the money or give me the pair of socks of the color I wanted. That's super. I trust them because they have made themselves vulnerable to me. I think there's a big lesson in that. If you make yourself vulnerable to the other party, then that is very good evidence that you are trustworthy and you have confidence in what you are saying. So in the end, I think what we're aiming for is not very difficult to discern. It is relationships in which people are trustworthy and can judge when and how the other person is trustworthy. So the moral of all this is we need to think much less about trust, let alone about attitudes of trust detected or misdetected by opinion polls, much more about being trustworthy and how you give people adequate, useful, and simple evidence that you're trustworthy. Thanks.
If you're enjoying this interruption and find the sound of my voice captivating, you may be experiencing extreme boredom. Try new, fast-acting Subaru Impreza in hatch or sedan, formulated with symmetrical full-time all-wheel drive. Cure boredom fast with